Dear learners, welcome to this session. Today we will be discussing the trafficking routes. It is very important to understand the source, the destination and the transit in human trafficking cases. So, we will be talking about these in details in this session. Trafficking routes mean as the data regarding trafficking of persons have emerged and being documented, a route has emerged on the world map by connecting the dots that are spread all over. When these dots are linked, a trafficking route emerges which is sometimes one way and sometimes both ways. So, coming and going back. The route further indicates that there is a greater density of the dots in certain specific regions of the world. So, at some places human trafficking is more, in some places human trafficking is less as compared to the other one. So, you have dots on the globe and when you join the dots, then you find the trafficking routes. We see that in certain areas the lines and dots end. So, that is the destination area from where the lines or the dots come out or start. To our understanding, that is a source area. We also find some stopovers or some breakpoints which we call transit areas. So, source area from where you get that person whom you are trafficking. Destination area is the final place where that person will be abused, tortured and kept. And transit is the mid route, the place, suppose you travel from Jharkhand to Delhi, then Jharkhand is your source area, Delhi is your destination area and the entire route in between is your transit area. India as a country is a source, transit and destination area for victims of trafficking. But even then there are certain areas which are prominently source areas as compared to others, while some are prominently destination areas. However, whether the areas are geographically located at different points in the globe, one common thread that binds all these areas is exploitation. So, irrespective of where you are located on the globe, the exploitation is one thing which is common in cases of human trafficking. Exploitation of the victim physically, mentally, emotionally and economically run across these areas. India is an origin, transit and destination country for men, women and children trafficked for the purpose of forced labor and commercial sexual exploitation. The United Nations Population Fund has published a report named as the State of the World Population in 2006, which says India is at peculiar position because it is among the few countries having high origin, destination as well as transit points in trafficking. When it comes to trafficking for organ transplantation, the country is a source and destination for such victims. India is a transit country for children trafficked from a country like Bangladesh for camel jockeying in Arab countries. But with respect to trafficking which takes place within the national boundary of India, there are many areas which are source, transit and destination areas either separately or all three. This was a 2006 report and now we have a global trafficking network. A network which can be accessed on the social platform, a network which can be accessed sitting in this room. So, the dimensions have changed, the source, transit and destination areas in terms of different crimes have also changed. The nature and the character of the source area keeps changing over a period of time. Very important concept to be understood. Some common characteristics of source area are poor economic conditions, drought prone or flood affected, or areas or with recurrent disasters, area with an ongoing conflict. So, the conflict in that area continues. So, in cases of disturbed areas, you find cases of trafficking because people do not have access to the infrastructure, to the natural resources and to development opportunities. So, they are vulnerable in the hands of the traffickers. Political and economic stability is also a characteristics of the source area. High rate of migration. You know, when you migrate from one place to another, you become vulnerable. High rate of violence and discrimination against women and children. Unemployment. Lack of availability of resources. Lack of availability of the infrastructure. Lack of implementation of the programs and policies, lack of education, inequalities, discrimination. We have discussed these in details when we were talking about the causes and types of human trafficking. Lack of political will, lack of coordination between the stakeholders, lack of information and awareness, lack of connectivity. Problems of not being heard and being discriminated. Destination area is an area where trafficked victims are taken to for exploitation, either in the form of commercial sexual exploitation, forced labor, pornography or organ transplantation, cyber crimes, illegal offences, sex tourism, etc. Generally, it is an area which is remote from the source area, but not necessarily outside the state or the country. Most of the destination areas are located within the same state boundary, a very important concept to understand. It is not that every time you have to cross the borders. Many a times destination area is also the same place. People who are bonded laborers, who are in domestic servitude, many a time stay in the same place. People who give their organs, people who give their bloods do not have to move from that area. They stay in the area. Prostitution, the brothels being worked in. Sometimes the brothels are places of small children also who are staying with their parents. So, suppose your mother is staying in the brothel or a place where prostitution is carried on, then you being a child will stay with your mother and will be very vulnerable to further abuse by the trafficker. Trafficking is more an intrastate or intra-country phenomenon rather than an interstate and inter-country activity. For instance, of all women and girls trafficked from the state of Andhra Pradesh for commercial exploitation, more than 3/4, 85.1% were trafficked within the state. This is the data from NHRC 2005. It is very important to consider why victims of trafficking are transported outside the source area. Possible reasons may be avoiding detection and therefore prosecution, and may be the demand pattern in such places and the price that the trafficker would get in exchange of the victim. If a place offers higher price than the others, that would be preferred more than others. So, the profit oriented concept is very important. I will sell that person to a person who will pay me more. I do not think about the exploitation done to that person who is being sold. So whoever will give me more money, I will just sell that person to him or her. So money, profit is the motive and not the well-being of the person, not the consent of the person, not the interest of the person. So people who have been trafficked are victims and survivors and not accused and criminals. Destination areas can also be tourist places, places of pilgrimage, industrial centers and areas where troops are stationed. The relationship between tourism and trafficking is very strong. All metropolitan cities in India are also the destination areas for traffic victims. They are places which receive thousands of tourists, both domestic and foreign, every year. During festivals, trafficking to such places increases because of the influx of tourists to such places during these times. Even when there is some natural calamity, then or migration happening or some kind of a disease, then people move from one place to another in groups in a large number. So out of their vulnerability, they are moving from one place to another. During the transit, they can be abused. At the destination points, they can be abused because they are vulnerable. For sustenance, they need money. They need food and shelter. So during festivals, in times of calamity, national emergency, any armed conflict, these people become more vulnerable. There is a difference between destination areas and destination points. The destination points are the locations where traffic victims are in confinement and being exploited for commercial sexual exploitation, forced labor, organ transplantation, amongst other things. For example, in Maharashtra and West Bengal, may be the destination areas for victims trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation. So this is a destination area. But the places within these states where the victims are usually held in confinement and exploited are locations where brothels are being run. So these are the destination points. So there is a difference between the destination area and the destination point. Destination area may be a state, a city, but destination point is the locality where that activity has been carried out. So destination point can be your home, because you are very vulnerable sitting at your home. If you have access to smartphones, smart TVs and iPads, then if you are not safe, then that can be a destination point. Your home can be a destination point in cases of cyber crimes, in cases of pornography, in cases where people use your photographs which are available on the Facebook and social platforms for tempering it and using it for the prospective customers to decide, to take a call whether to purchase you or not to purchase you, whether you fit as per their demands or you do not fit as per their demands. So these are the destination points. So destination area is a bigger locality where that destination point is situated. It can be a hotel, it can be a factory in cases of labor trafficking, it can be a home in case of domestic servitude, it can be an agriculture field in case of bonded labor. It can be a hospital in case of organ transplantation happening without permission. In case of surrogacy, it can be your home or a place where delivery has been done. So destination points are much more concentrated points as compared to destination areas. One may think that the source, transit and destination areas are separate and different as they are very far off, but this is not so in all cases. I gave you an example that the children of women who are subjected to commercial sexual exploitation, CSA, are extremely vulnerable to being trafficked into commercial sexual exploitation by the trafficker. The vulnerability is the highest in these groups of children because most of these children are born out of wedlock relationship or a contractual relationship. The parents themselves are in trafficking mostly for commercial gain and for survival. When they grow old and don't get clients anymore, then the traffickers force them to bring their children into that business. They lack care and attention, they are uneducated, they are unaware about their legal rights, they have fear in their minds of the trafficker, they lack education and opportunities to grow and develop and even to run out of that place. For if for 30 years, 20 years you have been exploited, then you give up. They are deprived of livelihood options and they are denied their basic rights such as right to live, right to freedom, right against exploitation and right to legal redressal of grievances. They become unprotected when their mothers become infirm because of certain diseases like AIDS or die due to the disease or sometimes desert them. Such children are children in need of care and protection. But if the implementation machinery is not working properly, then children are left for the violators of rights to abuse them and to take them to their advantage. In the cases of children born in brothels and who are pulled into CSE, there may be an overlap of the source and destination points. They are trafficked within the same source, transit and destination points. Same home, the source is same, the transit you don't have to move anywhere, and the destination point and the destination area is also the same. This is a case of internal trafficking where movement of the victim is not significant element. India is a transit and destination for sexual exploitation, for labor exploitation, for child labor, for child marriages, for organs, for drugs. And mind it, we have laws against all these forms of trafficking. We have labor laws, we have child prohibition laws, we have child marriages restraint act, we have organ transplantation act, we have drug laws, and we have laws related to abuse or sexual exploitation. We have Indian Penal Code, we have Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, we have Constitution of India which talks about dignity and worth and other fundamental rights, we have fundamental duties. Still we have these offences in India. This shows that the laws need to be implemented properly in India. We have to create awareness about different legal provisions and the Constitution of India, and we don't have to become customers or violators of rights. India is a source of hazardous labor, So source and destination area for hazardous labor. Chemical factories are there, Beedi Udyog is there, carpet factories, bangle industry, zari work. And if I talk about the major destination points in India where children are brought to work in these hazardous places are glass factories, slate industry, match and firearms industries, lock industry, diamond polishing industry, brassware industry, balloon factories, gemstone industry, carpet industry, cotton fields, agriculture fields, jewelry making units, brick kilns. So we have all these places, where the child has been trafficked for hazardous employment. So you cannot keep a child, you cannot employ a child, but this is a violation of the child laws or the labor laws in India. This is a violation of Right to Education Act. This is a violation of fundamental rights, Article 21A, Article 21, in terms when we think about a child who is so vulnerable that he cannot say no. Source and destination areas for victims trafficked for organ transplantation. The source areas are the ones with high level of poverty and high rate of unemployment. These are the areas from where the youth migrate to cities and urban areas in a larger numbers because the infrastructure, the job opportunities, the lifestyle is not available in the villages in the district. When they reach such areas, they are lured by the trafficker with huge amount of money to spare one kidney and other parts with promise of post-transplantation care and treatment. The vulnerability of the person forces him to agree to the trafficker and go for operation in the name of organ donation. So this talks about the issues regarding implementation of Organ Transplantation Act in India. Lack of post-operative care sometimes leads to the death of the donor, and sometimes the donor is not able to work throughout life, making him more vulnerable to the situation. There is a demand for the organ and supply of organs. So as if human beings are commodities. Human beings do not have any rights. So out of your vulnerability, I can just use your organ. So one person has a demand for an organ, one person is supplying the organ, and who is suffering in between? The person who is giving that organ, the donor, is suffering because he is unaware of the fact that he will not be able to take care of himself after the operation. He is not able to understand the issues related to organ transplantation. He is not able to visualize whether he will be able to afford 2 times meal after the operation or not. He is not able to understand whether he will be able to take post-operative care, which is mandated in cases of organ transplantation cases. Ignorance and unemployment, poverty, lack of resources forces a person to become a donor, and out of his or her vulnerability, he or she gives consent. This consent is not a free consent. This consent is not a consent which can be taken into consideration under any law. This consent is taken by fraud, by deception, by coercion, by abuse, by forcing, by giving you some lucrative offers, by showing you some good things which you don't know that will never come true. So these are the issues related to trafficking routes. So we find that trafficking routes that are the source, destination and transit needs to be addressed properly by the stakeholders with proper training, use of technology and the implementation of law, so that they are able to address the issues and implement the international documents, the conventions, the covenants, the Constitution of India and the legal provisions to protect the rights of the vulnerable people and to prevent them from being trafficked and to reintegrate and rehabilitate the victims and survivors of trafficking. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.